Which Mythic Plus dungeon is the most enjoyable of DragonFlight Season 2? I will be starting with the worst dungeon and ending with the best. This is my personal opinion, but feel free to jump into the comments and let me know what your most and least favorite dungeons are. But before we jump into my list, let's take a look at what you, the viewers, chose as your most and least favorite dungeons of Season 2. The number 3 most disliked, Brackenhide. Number 2 at Underrot, and the number 1 most disliked dungeon, Oldamon. So what about the top 3 most liked? Number 3, Freehold. Number 2, Halls of Infusion. And the most liked dungeon this rotation is Neltharian's Lair. Now let's see how this compares to my own personal list. Starting with the most disliked at number 8, Halls of Infusion. At the start of DragonFlight, this was an enjoyable dungeon as a heroic and a mythic 0. However, now that I've had to push keys here, I can easily say this is my most pain in the ass dungeon. I'll just say that the only 2 positives here are how the dungeon graphically looks and the 2 enjoyable boss fights, the frog and the ice boss. Aside from that, nothing here is fun. The first boss is sickening, most of the trash is annoying, especially the stealth mobs and frogs, and the ending gauntlet, yeah, I don't really even have to say anything, it's just bad. The Halls of Infusion is easily the worst dungeon in this rotation. Second most disliked dungeon at number 7, Brackenhide. Overall, the dungeon graphically looks fine. This is probably one of the easiest dungeons this rotation. However, the trash mobs are really bland. The bosses are also really simplistic and easy, resulting in a forgettable experience. Personally, I really hate the gnolls, so if it was primarily a different mob type, I might have actually ranked this higher. The third most disliked, number 6, Neltharis. The dungeon pathing here is a major peeve of mine. I hate pathing that results in fall damage. It's horrible design and it's enough for me to push this dungeon down this far. The trash mobs stay consistent throughout the dungeon, so there's not a whole lot of variety. The main positives here are it's a shorter dungeon and the bosses. The dungeon flows nicely enough that it feels like it ends when it should end, and the bosses are unique and fun to play against. They really are the shining point of Neltharis, but it's not enough for me to rank it higher. Middle of the pack now. These next 2 are interchangeable, and honestly, I might have ranked them higher had I not had absolutely abysmal experiences in these keys. Number 5, Underrot. While I normally like the look of these gloomy dungeons, this is the most difficult dungeon to see trash and boss mechanics. Due to the added visual difficulty, the trash really isn't enjoyable here. I actually like the bosses and their mechanics. However, if you have bad groups like I've had, these bosses are a nightmare. This dungeon is on this shorter side and flows perfectly. Honestly, even with the bad groups, I would have ranked this higher if it had had a graphical update for easier to see abilities. Number 4, Freehold. Now, I think this is probably going to be an unpopular choice here, and that's fine. I will say, I think I would enjoy this dungeon if I actually had competent groups to run it with. Personally, the Pirate Council and the Arena have been an absolute nightmare for me. Even in 18 keys, it seems a majority of my party members can't dodge the grape shot nor kite the shark. The trash is really challenging in this dungeon and offers enough differences that it stays smooth throughout. The bosses, when done correctly, are also really enjoyable. I really do like the dungeon's theme and how it flows. Honestly, I don't want to put this here, but I can't say I've had a single enjoyable Freehold run when pushing keys. The number 3 ranked dungeon, Oldamon. I would have ranked this lower, but my Underrot and Freehold experiences push this to number 3. The biggest negative here is how this dungeon lasts forever. Like, seriously, they could have removed some of the trash or given some movement speed increases. Aside from the dungeon length, there are a lot of positives here. There is plenty of variety when it comes to the trash, and the trash also increases in difficulty as you progress through the dungeon. The bosses here are easily the most challenging of all the mythics this season, but even though they are the most challenging, they are really fun fights, as long as you have a group that pays attention. Honestly, if this dungeon was shorter, it would have been a top contender for the best dungeon this season. I went back and forth on these last 2, but finally settled at number 2, Neltharian's Lair. This was extremely overtuned at the start of the season, but now it's been put in its place. Although I do still see some healers talking about the worm still being a little too strong, mob variety is really good and it changes as you progress through the dungeon. The dungeon pacing feels just right. I really love the overall look of this dungeon and the flow is just so smooth. Each boss is unique, challenging, and enjoyable to fight. Easily one of my favorites this rotation. So that means the last and best dungeon of this rotation is the Vortex Pinnacle. Even though VP is from Cataclysm, the dungeon still looks great. The dungeon is a straight path and it flows perfectly. It is also the shortest dungeon in this rotation, which is an added bonus. The trash changes as you progress through the dungeon and has a good variety. Each boss is unique, challenging, and an enjoyable fight. I really can't think of a single negative. Some might argue about the invincible mob that will attack if you don't look at it, but they are spaced out and very easily handled. Overall, Vortex Pinnacle is my choice for the best dungeon in DragonFlight Season 2. So that's the list. Every dungeon in DragonFlight Season 2 ranked. What's your favorite dungeon this season? What's your least favorite? And what are you hoping is added for Season 3? Let me know down in the comments below. Pressing that like button really helps me out. If you like WoW content, subscribe to the channel. I have guides, tips and tricks, podcasts, and more. I also live stream here on YouTube and Kick. All my links are down below. I'll see you in the next one.